Quiero hablar de él un poco antes de presentarlo. Él es profesor fundador y asesor en energía en Singularity University en Silicon Valley. Estudió en el Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Ahí obtuvo una licenciatura y maestría en ingeniería mecánica. Su tesis de grado consideró el modelo dinámico de la Estación Espacial Freedom, la actual Estación Espacial Internacional de la NASA. Él ha trabajado como ingeniero en exploración petrolera con la compañía francesa Schlumberger y durante varios años asesoró a muchas de las más grandes compañías petroleras del mundo. Recibamos con un fuerte aplauso al doctor José Luis Cordeiro.
Muy buenos días. I will speak in English because we are taping this and then broadcasting it, so we will have more public in English throughout the planet. And also because all the other speakers will be speaking in English too, since most of them are foreigners. I want to talk about the future and the incredible things we are going to see in the next few years. I am a research fellow in Japan. I am one of the founding members of the team of Singularity University in 2008-2009, and also I represent Venezuela with the Millennium Project, which began as the futuristic part of the United Nations, even though now it's an independent NGO monitoring the future of humanity. I love Peru. I have been here for many, many years, many, many times. The first time 25 years ago, and then obviously to visit Machu Picchu. But then I discovered about 10 years ago Caral Supe, the oldest city in the Americas, 5,000 years old, which helped to rewrite the history of the Americas and the planet, Caral Supe. So I don't know if you have all seen them, but if you don't, you have to go there. It's a beautiful place. And to talk about the world, we need to planet. So I want to show that famous map of the world, which we have seen so many times that we think that the world is like that. It's so popular that now even some cows have that map. However, that is not really how the world looks, because if you live in China, you actually look at the world centered on the Pacific. Any country. China, and as you can see the name, it has two Chinese characters. The first one means middle, and the second one means kingdom. The name of China is the Middle Kingdom. And you know there are many Chinese. 1 out of every 5 inhabitants of the planet is Chinese, and they look at the world that way. Because Peru is looking towards the Pacific, I also recommend that you use this view of the world. Because Asia, China, India are going to be the fastest growing areas of the planet during the next few decades. But obviously maps are relative. It depends on where you are. If you live in Australia, you will probably see the world upside down, differently. Or if you live in the Gulf area, the Persian Gulf, you could see the very famous islands of the Dubai. That is the world islands. You can actually still buy Peru. If you have $200 million, you can buy Peru. So my idea is that you change your view of the world, and also you change the new behind of the world. We have to think in new terms for the planet, and also because we are soon going to go beyond our tiny planet into outer space, finally. In the Millennium Project, we have nodes all around the world, including some people working with us here in Peru. And we publish a book every year about the challenges of humanity, the 15 global challenges, every year. Also, we just published a book about the future of Latin America. How could Latin America be in the year 2030? We presented this with 4 presidents of Latin America, including the president of Mexico, Enrique Peña Nieto, the former president of Brazil, Fernando Enrique Cardoso, the former president of Chile, Eduardo Frei, and so on, talking about the possibilities of Latin America in the future. So we obviously recommend this because it has to do with all the exponential change we are going to see in the next few years. And we have to change our mindset. Actually, we have to move from manufacturing to mind-facturing. Because I am originally Venezuelan, I want to show you the largest company in South America that I know most of you didn't know, but this is the largest company in all of South America, Petróleos de Venezuela, even though you didn't know what it was. But all of you know Mickey Mouse. you know? And we have to think now that the wealth doesn't come from raw materials. It comes from adding value. We have to move from manufacturing to manufacturing. To give you an example of that, I'll show you the power of manufacturing with my little Mickey Mouse hat, because I'm a big fan of Mickey Mouse. This hat of Mickey Mouse is all made with Venezuelan petroleum. Venezuelan petroleum. The plastic is comes from petroleum, the synthetic fiber from petroleum, the acrylic paint from petroleum. It all comes from Venezuelan petroleum. If you go to Disney World and you buy one of these little hats, how much do you think it costs? How many dollars do you think it is? $5, $10, $20? Someone gives more? Okay, it all depends on the size of the ears. The person who said $5 bought very small Mickey Mouse ears, or was very stingy. The person who said 20 bought big Mickey Mouse ears, or is a fool. This is an average Mickey Mouse hat of $10, or as the Americans say, $9.99. Okay, and this comes from a barrel of oil this big, from oil this big. What is the price of a barrel of oil today? It's about $50, $60. How many Mickey Mouse hats can you make from a barrel of oil? Let's say 1,000. 1,000 Mickey Mouse hats times $10, that makes $60,000. And the barrel of oil, $10,000. And the barrel of oil is $60. So the value is not in the raw materials, it is in the manufacturing adding value. And this happens in all the industries. And in Latin America, we have to move from manufacturing to manufacturing, because the jobs of the future will be in manufacturing. Another example in Colombia. Probably many of you would recognize Juan Valdez. For those of you who don't, you know, I explained it to my friends. This is the Colombian with the mule and the white bags. So when I tell this to my friends, oh, the Colombian with the mule and white bags, cocaine. And I say, no, the main export of Colombia. And my friends say, okay, cocaine. No, it's not cocaine, it's coffee. Many of you didn't know Juan Valdez, but all of you know Starbucks. And the important thing is that Starbucks sells more than 10 times all the coffee exports of Colombia. It is not important the raw materials. It is adding value to those raw materials, like Starbucks does. Okay? You can see this in petroleum. You can see this in coffee. You can see that even in cocaine. It's not important just to make the cocaine, but to add value, the distribution. Okay, in the future, we have 4 different possibilities about thinking about what is going to happen. The passive way, like the ostrich, which is the worst, because you don't want to know what is going to happen. You hide your head under the ground. Horrible attitude. A little bit better is to be reactive, like a firefighter. You participate when there is a fire, when there is a problem. A little bit better is to be proactive, when you buy insurance to be ready for any problems. But the best way is to be proactive. We can create the future that we want. We can build the scenarios, good scenarios and bad scenarios, to try to change the future. So I hope we don't have any ostriches here, because ostriches are not from Peru. But if we have ostriches, I hope that you are a technological ostrich. To talk about the future, I went to interview one of the most famous science fiction authors, Sir Arthur C. Clarke. I visited him 10 years ago in Sri Lanka. And he's very famous for many books and films, like Space Odyssey 2001. But he's also famous because he wrote, half a century ago, the 3 laws of the future. The 3 laws of the future. First law, when a famous scientist says that something is possible, he's probably right. But when he says it is impossible, he's probably wrong. Second law of the future, the only way of discovering the limits of the possible is to venture past those limits into the impossible. And the third law of the future, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So now I will talk about magic, because the technologies of the future are magic. And if they do not look like magic, it's because they are not advanced. 30 years ago, we didn't have personal computers. When I did my first thesis at MIT, I used a primitive technology called typewriter. I don't know if you have seen typewriters in a museum. I used that for my bachelor's thesis at MIT. 20 years ago, cell phones were just beginning. 10 years ago, companies like Google, Facebook, Wikipedia were growing. So what is going to happen in the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? We are going to see magic. We are going to see magical things. One of those is the control of the aging process, but I will not talk about that. I will talk about my favorite area, energy. We are going to have probably free energy in 20 years throughout the planet with renewable energy. Talking about immortality, actually, Google created a subsidiary called Calico, California Life Company, whose objective is to cure, to solve death. I believe that in the next 20 to 30 years, we are going to see the death of death. Obviously, that is if you do not want to die. If some people here want to die, that's fine. You can die, no problem. But we will have, for the first time in history, the possibility of living indefinitely in good condition. So in 2009, Singularity University started, and we teach all fantastic things that you will be learning more about today, all based on exponential technologies, accelerated change. And in fact, one of the predictions is that by 2045, according to the co-founder, Ray Kurzweil, he said that in 2045, we will reach the technological singularity when artificial intelligence surpasses the intelligence of humanity. And many incredible things will happen, as you can see in the subtitle, is the year when man becomes immortal. But ladies here, do not worry. Also, ladies will become immortal. The idea of the technological singularity was popularized in this book 10 years ago by Ray Kurzweil, where he talks about exponential change, and also you can see Moore's law, where computers are doubling every 2 years their computer power and reducing the price every 2 years, every 2 years. Now, actually, it's happening faster. Since the late 1990s, it is happening every year and a half. Some of you might remember some primitive technologies, like we used a few years ago. Ray Kurzweil also wrote another book now, How to Create a Mind. And I have the pleasure to supervise the translation and to write the introduction, the prologue to the book in Spanish. So I highly recommend the book. At least you should read my prologue of 4 pages. It's faster than reading 400 pages. But what does Ray Kurzweil talk about? How technology has been changing. You might remember 30 years ago, we used this 30 years ago. These are the IBM punch cards. This basically has 10 rows times 100 columns, approximately. This gives 1,000, okay? This is 1K of memory. I used this 30 years ago. But this you couldn't change. Once you wrote on this, you couldn't change. So the first electromagnetic memories were invented. And here is an example. This was 8 inches long, and the first generation was also 1K. But this 1K was much better because you could change, you could erase, and also because it had a bigger hole in the center. So 30 years ago, you had 1K mechanical and 1K electromagnetic. And as we say in Spanish, how much is un K más un K? Es una caca. Una caca. 30 years ago, we had 1 caca of memory. Fortunately, this was changing. As you know, we moved into this, which was 512 cacas. Then we moved into this, 1.4 mega. And now, if you go to China, Korea, or Japan, you can buy pen drives like this, which is 128 gigabytes. 128 gigabytes. You will remember me in the next 30 years, and you will remember caca. But this will be caca in 30 years. We will have devices smaller than this with more power than our brain. And this is not a wild guess. This is what really has happened, how technology is changing in all areas, not only with computers. Let me show you another example about biology. Now, with bioinformatics, you can sequence your genome. And this is an example of the partial sequence of my genome. You can see some of the companies doing this, 23andMe, and this is my name. My genome is uploaded in internet if you are interested. And you can see the diseases I will have. What is the probability of me having psoriasis, diabetes, cancer, and so on? Other diseases I don't want to show, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. What is the color of my eyes? What is the color of my hair? All of that is in your genes. And once you sequence your genome in the next few years with devices like this, which is called a gene chip, you will know what you will die of. Isn't this interesting? The probability of you dying of Alzheimer's. Okay? But the idea is so that you do not die of this, because medicine in the future will actually be a real science. Today, medicine is a caca technology. In the future, medicine will be a good science, and you will discover also where you come from. For example, this is my paternal line about 500 years ago, and you can see where my father comes from Spain all the way to Mongolia, Asia, and famous people related to my father like Genghis Khan. So no one wants to fight here with me. This is on my father line. Let me show you my mother line. And then from my mother's side, you see I'm related to Maria Antoinette. So I come from a very aristocratic family between Genghis Khan and Marie Antoinette. You will be able to reconstruct your genealogical tree, and for the first time, you will check if your father is really your father. But more interesting than going into the past is going into the future, and we will design our children in the future. This is an experiment I did with a friend, sharing genes. We shared genes. Obviously, this is a theoretical experiment to see the probability of different genes for our children, our descendants. So you might think this is expensive, right? This was incredibly expensive a few years back. In fact, the Human Genome Project began in 1990, and it took 13 years to sequence the first human genome. So it finished in 2003, and the US government had to pay over $1 billion. 13 years, $1 billion. Today, in 2015, you can sequence your whole genome in about 1 week for $1,000. And the estimate is that in 10 years, you will sequence your full genome for $10 in 1 minute. Look at this. This is truly exponential in cost and in time. This is much more fantastic than caca. This caca is very slow compared to what is happening in biotechnology, as you will discover. But now, let me talk about which are these technologies of the future quickly. Basically, the National Science Foundation, which is the equivalent of CONCITEC in the USA, the National Science Foundation talks about nanotechnology studying atoms, biotechnology studies cells, info, bits and bytes, and cognoneurons, the brain. The two technologies on the top are the hardware of life, the hardware of life. And the two technologies on the bottom are the software of life. And now I'll show you two numbers that are the complexity of the human hardware and the complexity of the human software. 15 years ago, a scientist created an artificial virus. But a virus is very small. Viruses have very few genes expressed in base pairs of nucleotides. If you remember, adenine with thiamine, cytosine with guanine, or something like that. A with T and C with G. 5 years ago, Craig Venter, who is one of the guest professors at Singularity University, he created the first artificial bacteria. This is the first bacteria that has no father bacteria, no mother bacteria, but the scientists put their email in the ADN of the DNA of the bacteria. It's the first bacteria in the planet that has email. So how long do you think it will take to make humans or things similar to human? A human has 3 gigabytes of data. Any of us here have 3 gigabytes of data. In this pen drive, we have 128 gigabytes. How many humans can we fit here? Here we can fit 128 divided by 3. That makes 42 humans and a little cat. Okay, we can fit in this. Now let me show you, this is the complexity of the hardware. Now the complexity of the software, what is the complexity of the brain which processes our software? The brain has 10 to the 11 neurons, 100 billion neurons. Each neuron has 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 connections called synapses. That makes 10 to the 14, approximately, synapses. Each synapse computes in very low frequencies. The brain is very slow, very, very slow. The brain has 6 main frequencies, alpha, beta, gamma, mu, etc., which are very slow. 1 hertz, 10 hertz, 100 hertz. A very fast brain is 1,000 hertz, like my brain. I have a brain of 1 kilohertz, 1 kHz. My brain is 1 kHz. Any of your mobile devices has a chip of at least 1 gigahertz. Your mobile phone is 1,000,000 times faster than your brain. 1,000,000 times faster. The difference is that our brain still has more neurons than your telephone has transistors. But this is going to change in the next 10 years, 20 years. And your phone will have more computing power than your brain. So this is the complexity of the human processing capability, 10 to the 17 computations per second. And that is if we do not speak about the mind, the spirit, and the soul. And I love to talk about those, but only after 3 pisco sours. Because to talk about the spirit and the soul, you need pisco sour. Okay, now let me move, explaining that everything is changing faster exponentially, even the economy. The human condition until the 18th century was no growth, was poverty, was disease, was death. That was the human condition until the Industrial Revolution began. And you can see in the 19th century, humanity grew 100%. In the 20th century, humanity grew 400%. This century, the 21st century, will be the most incredible century in human history. We may grow 2,000, 3,000, 4,000% in the century. We do not know yet, but it is incredible. In fact, development is moving faster and faster and faster. The first country in the planet that doubled its income per capita was the United Kingdom. And it took the United Kingdom, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, between 1780 and 1838. It took 58 years for the United Kingdom to double its income. Today, the world record is China. China, every 7, 8, 9 years, doubles its income. This is beautiful. Today, we know what works, and we know what doesn't work. We don't need to invent many things because they already exist, and we know how to do them. If we give examples of other countries, I love to talk about Japan because I lived 3 years in Tokyo. Tokyo has more people than all of Peru. Greater Tokyo has 37 million people. And everything works in Tokyo. Everything is on time. There is water. Everything is clean. Tokyo is so clean that you put your tongue on the floor and you clean your tongue. Try doing that in Lima, okay? But you know, 50 years ago, Japan, or 100 years ago, was very poor. Japan was so poor that the only thing that Japan exported were poor Japanese. In fact, you got many of them here, and even a president, Alberto Fujimori, okay? So you even had a Japanese president. But the change in Japan is absolutely incredible. In the last few decades, Japan has come from being poor to being very wealthy. And some of the best cars, computers in the world are Japanese. So it is possible to change. Peru can change quickly. Latin America can change quickly. At Singularity University, we use all these technologies to improve the human condition. How we can solve the global challenges of humanity with technology. We have incredible startups like Made in Space, doing 3D printing in space, Matternet, using drones for relief, for food, medicines. We have Modern Meadow that we will be listening to in a few minutes by one of the founders of Modern Meadow. So some of these startups are using these exponential technologies to improve the human condition. And now let me talk in the second half quickly about energy, because that is my industry, which I love so much. And energy is the largest industry in the planet. It is $8 trillion. There is nothing that compares to energy, nothing. In fact, if you look at the big companies all over the planet, they are always energy companies. Most of them are energy companies. The industry represents $8 trillion every year, and it will be totally disrupted in the next 20 years. We're going to move from fossil fuels to clean energy in the next 2 decades. But there is a lot of geopolitics. There are geopolitics here. There are geopolitics in the USA. As you know, some of the US presidents are involved in energy. You can see Bush, father, and Bush Jr. talking about energy with the oil companies. We shall not exonerate Saddam Hussein for his actions. We will mobilize to meet his threat to the vital interest of the Persian Gulf until an amicable solution is reached. Our best strategy is to be prepared. Failing that, we are coming to kick your ass. Okay, so energy is the largest industry, and it is very involved in geopolitics. a few years ago, the National Academy of Engineering of the USA chose which are the biggest challenges for humanity. And they chose, number one, to make solar energy viable. This report was coordinated by Larry Page, the president, the CEO of Google, and Ray Kurzweil, co-founder of Singularity University, as the number one priority of humanity. MIT, my alma mater, 2 decades ago, they created the MIT Energy Initiative. All the students at MIT today need to take one class on energy. Why? Because it is the biggest challenge for humanity. Once you solve the energy problem, you will solve everything else. And this is happening in the next 20 years. Energy is going through a big change of waves. First, we had lumber, then we moved into coal, then into petroleum, now into natural gas, and finally into other energy resources, mostly renewables. We are moving into the world of renewable energy. In fact, companies like BP, they do not longer mean British Petroleum. First, because it is no longer British, and second, because it is beyond petroleum. Companies, even in the oil industry, are moving beyond petroleum. And this is happening everywhere because the Sheikh Ahmed Yamani, one of the most famous people in energy, he said in the year 2000 that the Stone Age did not end because of lack of stones. And the oil age will end soon and not because of lack of oil. In the next 2 decades, we are going to leave fossil fuels, fossils. We will not use fossil fuels in 2 decades. Also, because of climate change. You know, there are real problems with climate change. As you know, humanity has cycles because of glaciation periods and other things that we do not understand yet. We also have changes because of the solar activity in our solar system. And also, there is evidence from many parts of the world, including here, Peru. Juanita, the most famous Arequipan. When Juanita died over 5 centuries ago, there was no ice, there was no snow in the top of the Andes. Think about that. There was no ice, no glaciers in Peru 5 centuries ago. So my point is we do not know what is happening, but something is happening that we don't understand, and we know that there is global warming, and that is the proof of global warming in the last few decades. So in different parts of the world, countries are moving beyond petroleum, beginning with the Arab countries, like in United Arab Emirates. Outside Abu Dhabi, they created this new city called Masdar. Masdar in Arabic means the source. I visited this city, Masdar city, a few months ago, which is incredible. It's only using renewable energy sources, electric cars, self-driving cars in this city that is just beginning outside Abu Dhabi. Even in Egypt, you can see now outside the pyramid that they are putting solar panels because there is plenty of sunshine in Egypt, in the Middle East. So much that we are going to have solar camels, and in our part of the world, we will have solar donkeys. Okay, so all these technologies are spreading very fast. How much land area do we need to move into the solar age? Very little. With only 6 blocks of 100 kilometers by 100 kilometers put in different continents, we will produce all the energy that humanity needs today. With only 6 blocks of 100 by 100 kilometers. We can put one for South America here, in southern Peru and northern Chile. And that will create all the energy we need in South America forever, forever. If we don't want to use land space, you can put it in the water. Japan is doing this in the water now. And also, we can go into space. NASA had a program by the year 2020 to begin doing experiments on wireless energy transmission from space. That was stopped in standby now, but Japan is following up because in space we have plenty of sunshine, and the sun never sets in outer space. Never sets in outer space. So Japan began with a program that by the year 2030, they will begin wireless energy transmission from solar panels into the Bay of Tokyo. And this is the Japanese government, a serious government. This is not the Nicaraguan government, okay? This is one of the wealthiest and most visionary countries in the world, Japan, moving into space solar power in the next 20 years. In fact, we have so much solar energy that the International Space Energy uses solar power. And then also, to go into other planets, we need a lot of solar power. And we can use the moon also to gather this energy and to send it back to our planet, the Earth. We will be able to terraform other planets, starting with Mars, with all this extra energy we can gather. So how much energy we use? How much energy does humanity need? In terms of power, humans, we consume 15 terawatts of energy, of power. That is the global consumption today. Humanity requires 15 terawatts of power. And how much power is there in the world? Well, the big elephant in the room is solar power. We have thousands and thousands of solar power. And for the first time, it is becoming cheaper than fossil fuels. So we are moving into a fast transition into solar power in the next 2 decades. This is called reaching grid parity, when solar power is cheaper than fossil fuels. And this is happening now in many parts of the world. Some places like California, Spain, Italy, the Middle East, it is already cheaper to use solar power than fossil fuels to power communities. Solar power follows a similar law to Moore's law. Remember Moore's law for computers? Computers are made of silicon chips. And what are solar panels? They are big silicon chips. So solar panels follow something similar to Moore's law. That is why they are becoming cheaper and cheaper, and they are growing faster and faster. And in 20 years, if this trend continues, and I believe this will continue, we will power 100% of humanity with renewables, 100%. No more petroleum, no more natural gas, no more gasoducto del sur, no more refinería de Talara, no more. All new renewable energies. And this will continue during the next few decades. I have done several TV programs on Discovery Channel and History Channel on this. You can watch me on Discovery on Latin America in the year 2111. What is the future going to be like? Now we have to join energy with transportation, because this is the other incredible revolution we are going to have, the revolution in transportation. We are moving into intelligent cars, self-driving cars. This is the example of one of the old Google cars. Let me show you the new Google cars. These new Google cars are incredible, beginning because they do not have a driving wheel. I was 2 months ago in California trying one of these cars without a driving wheel. I was scared, but then when I got inside, I saw there is no brake. There is no accelerator. The cars of the future will be computers on 4 wheels. You are part of the last human generation that drives, thanks God. In the future, we will no longer drive. We will be driven everywhere safely, cheaply. BMW announced that all their cars by 2025 will be self-driving cars, and many other companies are doing the same. Toyota, Mercedes, and also they will be electric cars. And for that, Tesla is revolutionizing the world of transportation with their electric cars. These cars will be charged in many places, but also in supercharger stations for free. Tesla is installing these supercharging stations that use solar panels to charge batteries to charge your car for free. For free. This is why gasoline cars will die, because it is impossible to compete with something better, environmentally friendlier, and not cheaper, free. It is impossible to compete with something free. So this is the end of the oil age. This is the end of the refinería de Talara. This is the end of the gasoducto del sur in Peru. Those 2 projects for Peru are $10.5 billion. With that amount of money, you can put solar panels and windmills all over Peru. You do not need gasoducto. You do not need Talara. Okay, this is the network of superchargers in the USA now. They are at less than 200 miles from each other, which is the distance that those cars can drive today, even though it's increasing faster and faster. You can go from any part of the USA to any part, West Coast to East Coast, driving for free. okay, without paying for gas, because the superchargers are for free forever, according to Tesla. Tesla just created a new gigafactory that is going to double the whole battery production of the planet. Double the whole production of the planet. Isn't that incredible? Just one factory? And they said, well, that's nothing. This is the first of many we are building. But who is coming after Tesla? The Chinese. The Chinese announced, forget about Tesla. Tesla, what is that? No, the previous one, I think it was. The Chinese announced that they are actually going to double the production of Tesla. So maybe it didn't appear there. Oh, here it is. BYD, which is one of the electric car companies in China. BYD means build your dreams. They said they are going to rival anything that Tesla does, only bigger, better, and cheaper, okay? So this is the end of fossil fuels, the end of fossil fuels. Why? Because we needed batteries also. And that is why Elon Musk just announced a few weeks ago also the Tesla Powerwall, so that you will be able to store all the energy that you require to be independent from the grid, from the energy grid. You might think this is not possible. Well, let me show you this can be done in less than 2 decades. This is New York in 1900. If you look, there were only horses, except for one little car. That was New York in 1900. What happened by 1930? Just the opposite. Only cars, except for one little horse here. It happened in 13 years, moving from horses to cars. In the next 20 years, we are going to move from gasoline cars to electric cars all over the planet, which will be more efficient, environmentally friendly, and cheaper, and no fuel, because it will be free electricity. One of the most famous futurists, Buckminster Fuller, talked about the global energy network, which has been talked about much more as the internet, the energy internet. What is going to happen in energy in the next few years? We are going to move from dirty energy into clean energy, from a stupid grid into an intelligent grid, from inefficient systems into efficient systems, from expensive energy into cheap energy. This is what is happening now with internet, the energy internet. And one of the most incredible discoveries in MIT a few years ago is what is called wireless electricity for short-range charging. We will not be using cables soon, fortunately, because cable is a very primitive technology. It's a caca technology. But we do not need cables. We will be using wireless transmission of energy in the next few years. There are many systems. In fact, also they are becoming every time more energy efficient. And we can harvest energy from many parts, including our bodies. Our bodies can be used as harvesting energy, and the devices will go almost down to 0 power consumption. One of the systems that is being standardized for wireless power is called Qi. Qi is a Chinese word that means flow, energy. This is one of the 2 major systems today for wireless charging, for wireless energy transmission. I repeat, in 10 years, we will not be using many cables. So for that, I created a word called the energularity. Just like Ray Kurzweil talks about the technological singularity, or my friend Aubrey de Grey talks about the Methuselarity, which is the time when we will be like Methuselah, 1,000 years old, and then we will be immortal. I talked about the energularity, the energy singularity that is going to happen in the next few decades when we move from fossil fuels into solar power throughout the planet. Cheap energy, eventually free energy, free energy. There is a very famous Russian scientist called Nikolai Kardashev who 50 years ago, he created the energy scale of the universe. You don't have to read this, but it's how much power do we consume? For example, do you know a human being is a machine that requires 100 watts? And our brain is the most energy-intensive part of the human body, and it requires 30 watts, which is the equivalent of a laptop computer. A laptop consumes about 30 watts. A mobile phone consumes about 5 watts of power. All of humanity requires 15 terawatts, as I explained before. And that is nothing compared to the amounts of energy in the universe. The universe is energy. The universe is full of energy. We do not have a crisis of energy. Who thinks we have a crisis of energy? We have a crisis of imagination. A crisis of imagination because the universe is energy. And we will reach what Nikolai Kardashev called civilization type 1, which is when a planet uses all solar power in the next few decades. And then we will move into civilization type 2, which is when we use all the energy of our solar system. And then we will move into a world of civilization type 3, when we use all the energy of the galaxy. And eventually, civilization type 4, which is the supercluster of the galaxy. And finally, civilization type 5, which is all the energy available in the universe, which is billions, trillions of times more energy than we use. We are just babies in energy, babies. We have an incredible potential with energy in the next few years. And then we will move into other types of energy as well. So I just want to talk about what the Chinese say. The Chinese that have fantastic phrases for everything, they say we should light up the world. The Chinese say, do not blame darkness. Instead, light up a candle. So I'm not here to blame darkness, but to try to illuminate what is going to happen. And because I also work in Japan and Korea, I want to show you the close-up of Korea. Because actually the sad reality is that there are two Koreas. One Korea of the future, South Korea, and one Korea of the past, North Korea. South Korea is a power. It's an incredible country that was poorer than Peru 40 years ago. Poorer than Peru 40 years ago. And today is many times richer than Peru. In your age, many times richer than Peru. So it can be done if you do the South Korean way, not the North Korean way. Because North Korea actually is poorer than Haiti, which is the poorest country in the Americas. So how can we have a country that divided? One part is incredibly wealthy, and it has the best internet in the world, South Korea. And North Korea is the only country in the planet that still has no internet. The last country in the planet without internet. So you can choose the future or you can choose the past. I hope you choose the future, which will be incredible, because we will move into a world of free energy. We will move from energy poverty into energy abundance, energy wealth. Look what happened in terms of mobile phones between the two last popes, the inauguration of the Pope in 2005 and 2013, or what has happened in Shanghai. These are pictures of what happened in Shanghai in a quarter of a century. This can be done. This will be done for the countries that want to change. So we have to think also about the yin-yang, as the Chinese say, because there is always the dark side of the force, the dark side of the force. And you can see yin-yang inside has little yin-yang, and little yin-yang has very little yin-yang inside. So these processes are very complex, so we have to think about the future. We have to meditate. I do a lot of meditation with my Hindu and my Buddhist friends, and I finish with this Chinese word. I learned Chinese characters when I was living in Tokyo, and they are very complicated and very difficult. Before I wrote them upside down or sideways. Today I know this is written like that, and this is the Chinese word that means crisis. Crisis in Chinese has two characters. The first character is danger, but the second character is opportunity. We are living the most incredible times of human history. In the next 20 years, we are going to see more changes in the next 20 years than in the previous 2,000 years. This is the best time to be alive. We can change the world thanks to exponential technologies, from energy to biotechnology and all other energies. Thank you very much.